Champaign County Agriculture Today with your host, Dennis Riggs.
Hello and welcome back to Champaign County Agriculture Today. My name is Dennis Riggs, your host for the next half hour as we discuss the issues in agriculture here in East Central Illinois. Today is a special program because many times I know you've probably had a question about agriculture and you'd like to go directly to a farmer. Well, where do you find a farmer? You just don't go out on a street corner or they're not listed in the phone book separately, but you'd like to ask an important question you have about agriculture directly to a person that makes his or her living out of the soil and out of production agriculture. Today we have two farmers on our panel and they're going to be working with us today, and we're going to be talking about the many issues of farming that you may have wondered about yourself, and more specifically we're going to be finding out from these gentlemen how they do their job. So with us today on my far left is Lynn Warfel, farmer from Tolono, and closely here we have Jerry Watson, a farmer from Villa Grove. So I'm going to start out, Lynn, with you down in the Tolono area. First of all, welcome to our program today.
Thank you, Dennis.
Give our viewers a little bit of an idea about your history, education, where you grew up, and then we'll talk about your farming operation.
Okay. I was born here in Champaign in Burnham City Hospital. Went home to the farm where I live now. It's the same farm where my father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather farmed. Their wives were instrumental in their success. I've been there 32 years now. I've been farming 43 years ever since college. Along with the farming, I'm involved in some civic activities related to schools mostly, but also activities related to church.
See, well, that's a good history. So you would be the fourth generation on your farm, is that correct?
Right.
Okay, give me a little bit of an idea about your education. Where other than the Tolono area, what education have you put into your farming career?
I graduated from Unity High School and then went to Wabash College over Crawfordsville, Indiana for 2 years in liberal arts. And during my sophomore year, I was considering a career teaching. And I started looking seriously at things like salary. And after I found out what the salaries were for beginning history, political science teachers were, for the first time I looked really hard at farming and decided I really loved farming. So I transferred from Wabash to the University of Illinois and studied agricultural economics for the next 2 years. And then actually I have continuing education because I use the internet and I use all kinds of materials to provide information, so I'm really in a continuing education field.
Great. Well, I'm sure a lot of us can relate to that story. There's always new things to learn every day.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move up the road a little bit over to the Villa Grove area where Jerry Watson, once again a multi-generational farmer. Jerry, thanks for being with us today. Tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and some of your education there and about your farm.
Well, I was actually born in DeKalb, Illinois, and lived there until age 5, and at that time my father moved our family down from DeKalb to Villa Grove, and my father took over his uncle's farm. And this is a farm that we, that's our base farm now. That's where our shop is. Grew up there, went to the Villa Grove schools, graduated high school, and then I went over to Illinois State and got a degree over there in ag business, and returned back to the farm and farming there with my brother, and I have a nephew that's farming with us, and I also have my son that's farming with us.
Mm-hmm.
So,
been around for a while also, it sounds like.
yeah, we've been there for quite a while, and it's nice to have had the opportunity to work with my father and then to bring my son back into the farm. It really is rewarding in ways that you can't even maybe put a dollar value on, but to have had the chance to work with your dad for so many years and then a chance to work with your son, the future for working with my son, I'm really excited over it.
We'll have to ask your son and see if he has a opinion of that, but I'm sure that he does.
Exactly.
Jerry, give me an idea of the different crops that you grow on your farm.
Well, we grow basically corn and beans, and the corn we grow a lot of Frito-Lay corn. We grow the white corn and yellow corn for Frito. And then we grow seed beans for Pioneer, the beans that are used they process, put in the bag, in return sell it to the farmers the following year.
Very good. So corn and soybeans are the main crops?
Yes.
Well, Lynn, I'm going to switch over to the Pasodum area, to Little area there. Crops on your farm, is it basically the same or anything different over there?
Pretty much the same. When I started farming, one of the main tract of land had seed corn on it for, well, ever since a plant was built in Tuscola. So I jumped into the seed corn, and then I very quickly expanded seed corn acres to the maximum I could get. But I always had some regular corn and soybeans, all except 1 year. 1 year I had all seed corn. All 2,000 acres was seed corn. And the mix of seed corn has varied quite a bit as the different kinds of seeds have been developed. Got into white corn and food grade corn for seed, and several other kinds. And then we also got into growing soybeans for seed use, and several different kinds of soybeans. There's specialty beans for tofu and some other things. So at one point I was growing about 6 different kinds of things, although it was all either corn or soybeans.
Why is that? People that know about agriculture or have seen a little bit of the crops around here, or people that may just drive out in the country, they see cornfield, bean field, cornfield, bean field. Why is it here in East Central Illinois that it's the case that those crops have the majority?
We have highly productive soils, and we have very good rainfall without irrigation. And so to capture and make the operation the most productive, we will grow the crops that people want the most. Those 2 crops happen to be corn and soybeans in this area. Another impact on that really is a transportation system. Illinois is blessed with a lot of rivers that provide transportation and get grain out to the Gulf of Mexico, which means the ocean, and worldwide. So that impacts what we grow also. I've grown white corn, white food grade corn that I trucked to a terminal down at Evansville. It was put on a barge, went to New Orleans, put on a ship, and taken to South Africa. White corn is a staple in the diet in South Africa. So you wind up tinkering with worldwide demand, really, right here in Central Illinois.
It's interesting that as we grow our crops, a lot of people don't understand the fact that the crop does not really obtain its true value until it is consumed, either as a seed that is then planted by another farmer and consumed as a growing plant, or in your case, the white corn that went to South Africa and was ground up into tortillas or whatever it was used for at that point in time. What was it used for, do you know?
I don't know, food, but I don't know. I doubt if it was tortillas, but some kind of corn flour, a staple in the diet.
But it is a consumable product, what we grow here. And of course, the big buzz now, people are hearing so much about the ethanol fuels, and I know a lot of our corn in this area is taken to Decatur, Peoria, where it goes into ethanol fuel. So you're actually growing for an end result, which makes it good. Well, Jerry, let's turn to you for a second. I have people that ask me, well, gosh, a farmer, they plant their corn and beans in the spring, and they come back in the fall and they harvest it, and gosh, what are they doing in the middle there? Is there anything going on? Give us an idea. This show is being taped in the middle of the summer. The crops are planted, they're growing quite nicely. We've had some great rains. Give me an idea of what your daily routine would be in the off seasons, such as summer, and then we'll also talk about winter.
Right. I know, I think to the general public, the conception is that farming, if you're not actually out in the tractor working ground, that the farmers are not working or not busy, and it's anything but the case. It seems like in agriculture anymore that the amount of time that we spend actually in the cab of a tractor is almost so much getting lesser, and it's not necessarily the most important part of what our operation at making it financially successful. But in our case, after, of course, we go through the spring, work the ground, plant it, then we come back in and we're always doing spraying. Spraying takes up a large part of our early summer. the weed pressures and the chemical that we use anymore is just, there's not much residual chemicals that are in the soil. So as you get a flush of weeds, we go in and spray it. And then as we get into summer, we even start looking at, we start preparing our machinery for the busy time for the fall. And we start, doing marketing decisions. There's, of course, the marketing is done throughout the whole year, but just a lot of preparation for your next phase of what you'll be doing. You always try to stay one step ahead.
Well, what I'd like to do, gentlemen, is go through some actual occupations. A farmer wears many hats, and he has a lot of different skills that he has to put together, he or she, to make his farming operation successful. So I'm going to ask you both for a little story about these different occupations, either how you do it or how you've participated with these people. Let's start off with the mechanic. Lynn, tell me a mechanic story that applies to your farming operation.
Well, I think every farmer has to be a reasonably good mechanic himself. We are being challenged right now because just like with automobiles, there's a computerization of the different functions of a car. There's computerization in tractors and combines and sprayers. And for the most part, we can't afford to have the diagnostic machinery to work on that stuff ourselves. We can do things like oil changes and replace worn out parts, deal with tires. There's a lot of tires on my farm to move everything. So we wind up messing with tires quite a bit. And then the things like starters and batteries that we deal with regularly. And then there's, in my operation, I've had a fairly large storage system for the grain. I tend to store about 2/3 of the crop on my farm in grain bins. So there's augers and electric motors and lots of electrical switches that I use to transfer grain in and out, and the trucks. So mechanically, there are a lot of things I can do myself, but I have to rely on specially trained technicians. Some of them don't even get their hands dirty anymore because they're only working with the computers that are inside my tractor or my combine. They tend to get their training in very special schools. Locally, Parkland College is involved with that. Lakeland College down at Charleston, or Mattoon, is also involved with that, where people who are interested in being a technician and getting a better salary than a plain mechanic or somebody who can change their oil, go to school and get that training, and then I call them up and get help when I need it.
We have replaced a lot of the labor-intensive jobs on the farm with machinery, and of course that's why we have a reliance on mechanics and machinery. What about on the Watson farms? Tell me a mechanic story of what you guys do, Jerry.
Well, the mechanics are extremely critical in our operation, and actually my nephew went to school at Lakeland and got a John Deere technical degree, to where he's very, very skilled in a lot of the work that needs to be done on our machinery. And like Lynn said, though, the motors, there's so many computers in these motors and different things, to where it's beyond the mechanics that we're familiar with when we grew up. Where it's more, everything is getting more detailed, more technical, and so you need skilled people to come in that can hook their computers up to the machines, find out what the problem is, and then get things fixed. But we go through a lot of preparation prior to whatever season we're about to enter, and we do a lot of checks over the machinery before we take them to the field, preventative type repairs, and just to make sure everything is in shape, so that when we go to the field, we don't have downtime that we could have prevented.
That's another item that people may not think of. If we do have a repair need, it's not like you're in town and you're just a few blocks away from a mechanic. We're several miles out, and it takes a little preparation. Do you have a mechanic or some type of a dealership on the speed dial of your phone that you might have to call them?
Well, you have about 2 or 3.
I kind of figured that.
2 or 3, and it is there is definitely an urgency when something breaks down, as you time is money, and anytime that you can't keep your machines rolling, it's costly. So, yeah, it's very critical that the mechanics, the implement dealers have been very good in responding to our calls and to all the farmers' needs.
Okay. Yes, Dave.
That's one of the interesting things about American agriculture, Dennis. We are so fortunate that different pieces come together in our society, so that there's engineers who are constantly developing better machinery. There are dealers who are constantly training their employees to be better technicians, and then a whole bunch of other people that work together really to make sure that when the corn or the soybeans are ready to harvest, all the preparation has been done, and we can take our equipment to the fields and accomplish our task of harvest. Worldwide, there just isn't any other place where that all happens the same way. If I have a breakdown and I need a piece to repair a machine, if my dealer nearby doesn't have it, I'll have it the next morning. For example, in Russia today, there are machines that sit for years waiting for repairs, and they tend to get cannibalized, for parts. We don't have that experience here. We can repair very quickly and get the machine back going again. That's really an important part of our business, because we only have a certain number of days that are optimum for planting and a certain number of days that are optimum for harvesting. And if we don't do the operation in those time frames, it takes away from our profit. And we're in business to have a profit.
Mother Nature doesn't wait. Bless her heart. Farmers have one chance a year to get a paycheck, and I like to dispel a rumor right now. A lot of times people talk about farmers do complain a little bit. They complain maybe about the weather, piece of equipment breaking, but really the goal is to grow that perfect crop with the optimum yield so it can be consumed by the different industries out there. So we're just trying to do a good job, right, fellas?
It's a little like raising children. Before they're born, the children are perfect. But in the process of raising them to adulthood, things happen along the way, and they're not perfect.
That's right. Not quite the perfect way to do it. Well, let's move on to the next one. I know the Watson Farms have some experience here in seed. You just don't go to the local True Value hardware store or whatever and pick up some corn or pick up some bean seed. Jerry, what goes into purchasing good seed for your farm?
First of all, I am a seed dealer. So,
I thought you might know a little bit about that.
In that sense, to me, the perfect seed is come check with me to get your seed, I guess. But now there's a lot that goes into the decision of seed making or the seed purchasing, and it's probably one of the most critical jobs the farmer does, because the genetics or the traits that you buy with your seed is going to determine what your profitability or what your yield potential can be. And if we do a poor job of helping people pick the right genetics and the right traits to put in your genetics, it'll affect their bottom line. So we need to, or I personally stay up on the traits that are put in, the genetic history, characteristics of a plant. Is it going to have strong roots? Is it going to have a strong stalk? Is it a good yielder? That sort of thing. And so we spend a lot of time in going through and selecting the right hybrids, because that is our one chance to, that's for yield potential. We pick the wrong ones, we're in trouble.
Give me just a rough, I'm going to put you on the spot here, through one company, let's just pick a company that you work for, how many choices do I have of corn to plant in my field of dirt out there?
Okay, well, in the line that I would represent is Pioneer, and in that line alone, you probably have a choice of over 50, 60 hybrids that you could pick from in corn to plant in your fields.
Each one with a unique trait and with unique characteristics.
Right.
How about soybeans? Is it approximately the same?
Soybeans, you're probably going to have a range of maybe 20 to 25 that you would plant. But in each area is depending where you're at, you're probably going to cut those choices down to maybe 5 or 6. you're going to eliminate a lot of those choices real quick, but then it'll get down to where you're basically going to choose between 5 or 6 hybrids for a person's farm.
But it's not quite as easy as it looks, right?
No,
Okay,
no,
well,
it's not.
takes some skill there in agronomy. Well, Len, let's walk over to the fuel salesman. Now, on your farm, you have several different pieces of equipment. Tell me about purchasing fuel and how you do that on your farm.
I get help from a dealer, and that's his only job, are providing fuels to a farm. I also read about that, and the conferences I go to, we talk about that. There's been a steady change in the fuels that we use. 43 years ago, it was almost all gasoline, regular gasoline that had lead in it. Then we transitioned to gasoline without lead, had to adapt our engines to that. And we transitioned from that to diesel engines, and now virtually all the big engines on the farm are diesel engines. And then we shifted to ethanol. Instead of gasoline, regular gasoline, we use ethanol. I've been doing that since about 1980. And that required some adaptation and some consultation with the experts in fuels. We've also switched to biodiesel now, initially with a 2% additive of soy oil, and now with an 11% portion of soy oil. And so we're constantly reevaluating how these fuels work, how it impacts our power and our maintenance, the economy of our machines, because fuel is a fairly expensive part of my business.
So fuel, and it's nice to hear that some of the fuel is coming right from the farm in the basis of ethanol and soy diesel.
Yes.
Jerry, let's go to you for a second. Now we've got the fuel in the tractor, and we've picked our seed, but now we need maybe some fertilizer and some weed control out there on our farm. Tell me the process you go through in a short capsule of how you select that.
Right. Okay. Well, the fertilizer, the selection for fertilizer would been done after the spring planting. We go in and do soil testing, and we go out on a GPS grid. We go out and collect soil samples across the field, have them sent to a lab where they're tested for the nutrient levels, and then we get the test back after the crops are taken off in the fall. Then we apply what is needed to either build the soil back up or at least replace what the crop took out.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that is done, I go through our local fertilizer dealer. He comes out and we sit down and we just look at our fields, and we want to make sure we're maintaining the proper levels.
Mm-hmm. Now, the weed control that you use on your farm, is it
Yes.
kind of the same process?
When we start selecting for weed control, it actually starts with your seed selection, because most of the beans that we grow today have a Roundup resistant seed that will be resistant to Roundup, and so most of the chemical we use on our beans will be sprayed with Roundup. And Roundup is a non-selective herbicide. It'll kill all weeds that are out there, and then the beans are resistant to it, so they can actually it doesn't affect them. Now corn, also you can buy corn that has Roundup resistant, and so you can also use Roundup for your weed control in your cornfields. There is a little bit of a concern of weeds becoming resistant by by only using one chemical to control both your weeds and your corn and beans. We are running a risk of a resistant weed development.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people will use another combination, residual chemical such as Callisto, which is a broadleaf weed killer that we put into our mix just so that we don't want to get weeds that are resistant to Roundup, and then it'll create a major problem.
Of course, the whole idea here is to create a field or an end product that has the food that we're growing or the product that we're growing, and not the weeds, because they're a competition. Right. Well, then it sounds like there's a lot of discussions here that are based around agronomy, and of course, whether it's the university, extension, what kind of agronomy information do you work into, and do you rely upon anybody to help on your agronomic questions?
Jerry and I both go to conferences in the summertime and the wintertime too, and that's a good source for us. The University of Illinois puts it on, chemical companies put it on, seed companies put them on, and so we go to a variety of conferences during the course of the year. Actually, I start my morning on the computer, Dennis, and check the overnight markets, and then also look at some sources for agronomy type news. The universities are really great at providing news on the internet, and so are the seed companies and the fertilizer companies. So I spend up to an hour first thing in the morning. Between 6 and 7 in the morning, I'm usually on the computer checking those things and thinking about what I need to do during the day.
Your electronic daily agronomic news delivered to your computer. That's probably a good way of putting it.
When I first got out of college, I spent 80% of my time outside the office and in the shop and in the fields, 20% in the office. And now I farm twice as much as I farmed then, but I only spend about 20% of my time outside the office. 80% of what I do on the farm, I do in my office.
It has changed a lot since our fathers and grandfathers tilled the soil, that's for sure. Yes. Well, Jerry, we've got the crop growing now. It's up and looking good, and we can look ahead to marketing the crop. You know, you just don't take the corn and beans, the elevator, and say, here it is, what will you give it for? What will you give me for this bushel of corn or this bushel of soybeans? What about a marketing plan? How do you think about marketing your crop?
Yeah, well, marketing plan can be fairly complicated, and it can be, you know, you can market one crop over an 18-month period. So you're combining years together. When you do market, you're starting. You want to start a marketing program early. A lot of times in the spring of the year is when some of our better opportunities to price the grain, the growing crop, and at that time you probably still have some crop carryover from the last year crop. So it can get a little bit complicated in figuring out a good pattern, but the thing that you want to do is try to sell when you see prices over the cost of production. And you can, you know, that's our goal.
There you go. One thing that people don't realize about farming is that all this soil out here used to be a swampy area in east central Illinois, and we have an intricate network of drainage underneath our soils to keep them going. Lynn, do you work with the drainage in your operation?
That's a critical part of the soil being productive. My great-grandfather actually was one of the early settlers and helped establish the drainage ditches in my area. So, and I'm a commissioner in the same drainage district now. So I see some of his paperwork and signatures when I'm doing that kind of work. We keep our drainage ditches open and maintained so that they can carry the excess water away. We also have extensive underground tile systems that help carry excess water away. Too much water is really a disaster for both corn and soybeans. They need oxygen in the soil, and they need some water there for movement of fertilizer, for nutrients. So those are things that we monitor pretty carefully.
Let's get that crop harvested, and really quickly, in just a little bit of time we got left, Jerry, what about taking it to the elevator? Is that where the grain ends up in your area?
Yeah, we probably store close to 50–60% of our crop on the farm in our own storage. Other than that, when we have to take to the farm, we have it either trucked in through our own trucks, or we hire other trucks that actually get it to the elevator, and then they take care of it from there.
Well, fellas, it sounds like there's a lot of partners in agriculture, that even though you're individual farmers on your multi-generational farms out there, you rely upon a lot of different people to help you from planning to production to marketing on a modern day farm. And we thank you for being with us today to let us know about that. And we thank you all for listening out there today. We hope you'll tune in again next time when we talk about more of Champaign County agriculture on Champaign County Agriculture Today. I'm Dennis Riggs, your host. Thanks for listening.
Champaign County Agriculture Today is brought to you by Champaign County Farm Bureau.